You have gone from Harvard Law School graduate to a founder of a personal self-defense tech startup, which is, I think, is so dope. But what led you to go to Harvard Law in the first place?
Yeah, so, I always kind of had this interest in law. When I was in undergrad, I started working at a law firm pretty early on, my sophomore year, just to kind of get my feet wet, see if I liked it, see if it was something I wanted to do. And it clicked for me. And the firm that I was working at the time, my boss and I, it was a really small place, so we got really cool over the years. I worked there until I graduated from undergrad. And when it came time to apply to law schools, I was applying to these top 14 schools, and I was getting into everyone that I was applying to, and I would let my boss know, keep him updated. And he was like, why don't you apply to Harvard? And I was like, they don't waive the fee waiver. So, it's not, I was not going to apply to Harvard because they didn't waive the fee. And I was like, I probably wouldn't get in it anyways. You have that doubt. And I think
because it's Harvard. That's a big deal.
It's Harvard. And I think too, just, black men, black women, sometimes we just doubt ourselves. We don't think that we're supposed to be in those spaces. And my boss at the time said to me, if I pay the application fee, will you apply? I said, okay.
Yeah.
I applied 10 days before the deadline, and I got in.
That is dope.
Yeah.
That is super dope. So I guess, what was your experience like there?
It was really great. It was a different experience. I went straight through from undergrad to law school. And so I was like, coming out of college, going to Harvard of all places, I was like in this super focused mindset. And I found that it wasn't as crazy as I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to get there, and it's like, you're not sleeping anymore. You're up every night in the library until 3 a.m. And just wasn't my experience. It was challenging, but it also taught me too, like, you're managing your time. Like, you focus on what you need to focus on and you get it done. I loved it. I thought it was a good experience. And I felt like I got to do some really cool things while I was there.
That's super dope. I've heard people, different various people, like Jordan Peterson, who's he's a clinical psychologist. He's talked about sometimes the difference between a Harvard versus another college or university that might not be as popular. And of course, this isn't true for all, but he said oftentimes it's more so the brand than it even is. Of course, still, let's put respect on Harvard's name. There's still you have to work hard. There's still a lot that comes with it. But I think that's part of the intimidation. Again, it's just an assumption. Part of the intimidation that people think like, I might not be able to do it, is because of the prestige that comes behind it. But as long as, and I mean, tell me if you agree or disagree, as long as someone, and maybe this kind of relates to the tech industry or relates to like other industries where it can seem so intimidating, but it's like, hey, as long as you manage your time, as long as you work hard, all of those different things that, it find, just like you found out, like, hey, this actually isn't that like overwhelming.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think getting in was one of the hardest parts. I was already in the school mindset since I was just coming from undergrad, and it feels very linear. I mean, once you're in, you know what you have to do. You have exams coming up. You have to read. You have to study. It's a clear path of what you need to do. I think it's a little bit different as I navigate this startup world now. It feels there's no clear path. Everyone goes at it a different way. And that's been a little bit more challenging because it's like, you have to figure it out. You have to grind. What works for them isn't going to work for you. Just because it didn't work for them doesn't mean it's not going to work for you. You have to kind of create that yourself. So it's a little bit more of a unique path that you really have to like have that heart to keep going. I felt like law school, you have to have that grind for sure to get in. But once you're in, it's like, I have to keep doing what I was doing that got me here. I need to study and focus. And it's like, if I do that, I'll do well.
Yeah, I think, and this is an assumption, but you strike me as a type A person, or a person that likes structure, things like that. And it's so interesting seeing the two different types of entrepreneurs, where they're the entrepreneurs that are much more kind of free flowy, much more just kind of creative energy. And then there are others where it's like, again, it's like, structure, things like that. Almost like the difference between a Tim Cook versus Steve Jobs, where Steve Jobs was very creative, just kind of all over the place. And then Tim Cook is he's much more structured. And it's like, the irony is that both can be successful, as Steve Jobs obviously is one of the greatest, creatives and technology creators of all time. But also Tim Cook being more of a type A person, he's not as creative, but Apple's become more successful under his lead. So I love like someone like yourself who is so big on structure, but you still being like, hey, I'm still gonna do this thing and I know I'm still gonna make this work. So I think that's super dope.
Yeah, absolutely. And just being open to, you know, you're not always gonna have structure in startup life. There are gonna be ebbs and flows and you're gonna be constantly learning new things, and that's been fun too, like adapting to that and just like learning as I go.